We open the show on a sad note this week. We send our condolences to Danny Frawley's family and friends. He will be sadly missed by everyone in the AFL world and his workmates at Foxtel and St Kilda Football Club. Hello and welcome to the Multicultural AFL Footy Show. The finals are well and truly on, with mixed results over the weekend. Some favourites didn't perform and others surprised with their poor performances. We will review all the finals from last week and get on with previewing the two semi-finals this week. I am Vanessa Gatica and I'm joined by my two co-panelists, Javier Sincan and Gabriel De Angelo. Hello guys.
Hello Vanessa.
Vanessa, Javier.
Hi.
Just a question, guys. When was the last time the teams that finished in first and second on the AFL ladder lost their first finals games? Bet you don't know. You can have a guess.
Oh, I don't know.
Idea.
No idea.
Come on, try.
1970, 1975. No idea.
Last year?
No.
I've got no idea.
Give up? Okay. It's 1926 and 1925 when Geelong and Essendon finished the season in first and second, only to be beaten by Collingwood and Melbourne respectively in their first finals matches. In the end, Geelong and Collingwood played off in the grand final where the Cats won their first premiership by 10 points. West Coast Eagles and Essendon met on Thursday night in the first elimination finals from Perth Optus Stadium. The Bombers were not even competitive, going down by more than 9 goals, giving the Eagles their first finals win over the Bombers ever. A part of the first 30 seconds, when Essendon kicked the first goal, the rest of the game was dominated by the West Coast Eagles. Javier, what do you make of this match and the future of both teams?
Well, first of all, I think he probably guessed it right last week. He was saying that it's going to be a big margin, although I didn't expect that. I actually didn't expect the way Essendon have performed the whole year. They've been having 2 years of good trade times as well, and they've got good players who can perform, and they really need to look into themselves, like where it all went wrong. Last time, I believe it was against the Bulldogs when Washford said that this is not who we are. So, and the questions were asked like, who really you are? And this was the finals time, and they just couldn't come up with anything. They just totally got decimated by the West Coast Eagles. So they knew what they were up against. They knew their midfield. They knew that they're gonna be facing McGowan, Barras, like everyone. So I said they needed to come up with a better plan. Unfortunately, they just didn't do the basics right. That's what sort of kills me. Like, as in, a lot of kicks going wayward, and there was no like a plan in kicking, this and that. So they got beaten in everything. And Nick Nat, he played fantastic as well. I'm not taking anything away from West Coast. I think they did a wonderful job, and that's how the final should be played.
Yeah, I'm glad we're filming this because finally you're agreeing with something I said. But yeah, because last week we did say this is going to be quite an easy win for West Coast, and what's going to happen afterwards, off the field, that's going to be interesting for Essendon because West Coast are going to be chugging along quite nicely. They're doing well, as you mentioned, Nick Naitanui. Fantastic game. My God, he's a fantastic player. He was that one little key ingredient that the West Coast needed, and they're going to be very hard to beat when they play against Geelong, but we'll talk about that in greater detail. But Essendon, they were just flat out disappointing. They were just really, really atrocious. As you said, they weren't competitive. They were nowhere near close to West Coast. And you sort of think, well, you've had 2 weeks to prepare. There were some injuries, but not so much that the younger guys and you know, the more experienced heads couldn't have had some sort of impact on that game. And what was really sort of frustrating was that every time the midfield would get the ball, they would just boom it back into the defensive area of West Coast. And they're big players, so they're always going to pick it. They're always going to get it all the time. So they'll get this opportunity and just waste it straight away. whereas West Coast were just far more clinical. So you just have to think, well, what is going on at Essendon? And there is a lot of speculation, a lot of talk about Ross Lyon coming back and he might be coach of Essendon and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of question marks at Essendon at the moment. They were really, really bad. I was expecting probably not that they weren't going to be close, but they could have at least given a little bit more of a fight in that game. They were just overrun by a team that are just too damn good at the moment.
Yeah, Essendon needs to do introspection. And for Geelong, West Coast Eagles, I think finals, they are in for the finals, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Geelong took on Collingwood from the MCG on Friday night. The Magpies, even with players out with injury, look very impressive. The three stars Grundy, Elliott and captain Scott Pendlebury completely eclipsed the Geelong midfielders in the first half, shutting off supply to Geelong forwards and looking the ball on the opposite side of the ground, where the Magpies kept attacking the goals. It took Geelong 2.5 quarters to wake up and play, but it was so late. The damage was done. Well executed by Collingwood from 10-point win. Gabriel, what did you think about the game?
Well, I think it said more about Geelong more than about Collingwood. I think that Geelong, they really squandered that opportunity. That was really, really theirs for the taking, and they can say whatever they like about them not playing at GMHBA Stadium and all that sort of stuff. There's no excuse. They've played at the MCG many, many times. They have players there that are extremely experienced, and you would think that some of their leaders would have stood up at that game. It's a finals game. Everybody needs to be accountable. And the only one that was really accountable was Patrick Dangerfield.
That's it.
He almost won the game single-handedly.
Yeah,
Everybody else went missing.
Definitely,
And you
yes.
have players like, I know you don't want to hear this, but Tom Hawkins, he's right in front of goal. He should be scoring goals. He's the linchpin of the forward line. How is it that he is the All-Australian forward when Ben Brown isn't on there? You know what I mean? But there was some criticism labelled at Geelong from, in particular, David King. And he was right when he said that, why was it that Scott took off Stanley for that game? Reece Stanley has been playing fantastic for in his position the whole season. Why would he take him off or not have him on the ground and just rearrange the whole style and system and structure of the team in such an important game as that? I mean, to be really honest, I couldn't understand what he was doing. You just have to sort of scratch your head and think, it's a final. You have to win this game to set yourself up for the preliminary and possibly the grand final. And they just blew their chance away. It was ridiculous how bad it was. Just really poor planning.
Yeah, and just like last year, they were facing a team which was just coming up against Melbourne, and then they squandered their chance up as well. And this year, if any team had the excuse, that was Collingwood. They had the injuries going on and the new players coming in. But that's how the good teams perform in the finals. Like they work in a system, and whoever sort of comes in, they know their system, they know how to play, and then they just carry out the system and they win. So that's exactly what they did. And as you mentioned, that it was too late before they wake up. And I couldn't see that fighting spirit from Gary Ablett. The Joel Selwood was there, but it wasn't there. And to some extent, maybe there's a lot of talk about later on with regards to the jerseys they were wearing and that kind of stuff. That sort of played on a couple of players' mind. We saw that in the game too. That was a bit of a factor, but that was for both the teams. So what I'm trying to get here is there's no excuse for Geelong to say that they lost a match. So there's nothing. It's just that they got beaten by a better team on that day who were well prepared. Although they were injured and everything, and new players come in to take their place, still they got dismantled. And Geelong really need to look forward. They really deserve to be in the finals now. I mean, the competitiveness, although the score looks better towards the end, that it only lost by 10 points or so, but that was no way reflective of the whole match.
It looked like Collingwood wanted it more, didn't it?
Yeah.
It really did. And the only reason why Geelong was sort of near at the end was because it looked like Collingwood were just a little bit tired, maybe.
Yes.
That's it.
And that was really about it.
Yeah.
So Geelong, I've got doubts that they're going to do anything against West Coast, but I'm sure we'll talk about that
next is the win.
later. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, boys. Coming up, we discuss the Saturday finals matches following the short break. You are watching the Multicultural AFL Footy Show. Welcome back. Last Saturday's mid-afternoon final was played at the Giants Stadium in Sydney's Olympic Park precinct, where the GWS Giants and Western Bulldogs met for the elimination final. Just 3 weeks ago, the Bulldogs decimated the Giants, but the tables were turned on the weekend, and the Dogs lost by 58 points. There are 2 Giants on report: Harry Himmelberg for striking Western Bulldogs star Bontempelli, and a more serious charge for Toby Green going directly for the tribunal for eye-gouging the same player. It doesn't look good for Harry, but worse for Green, especially with his reports and suspension over the last few years. The GWS Giants will naturally move on next week, while the Western Bulldogs will regroup for next year. Javier, you would be disappointed about the Bulldogs?
Yeah, as a fan, definitely I am. But we got beaten by a better team who played better on that day. That's we have to confess. They were better around clearances. They were better around stoppages, and the way they dealt with the trio of their midfield, I think it was very good, and they had their big guns back. So although there was a question that how will they perform as well, but they performed very well. So all of them sort of made a contribution towards the end. Although I must say the game's spirit was a bit shaken during that game. Although we all loved the physical nature of the footy, I think they came on attacking, and it was the physical sort of force that I think Bulldogs couldn't keep up. I would say, and they got sort of bullied on that day. That's probably led to their downfall. But the way Toby Green performs on the field, I mean, that really raises some questions. Are we really? He's playing the top level game at the moment, top at our AFL. A lot of kids would be looking up to him. But is that what we want to show? I think this time he just copped around $7,500 fine, and he said he's remorseful of what he's done. But that many charges over that many years, is it really sort of an excuse?
Yes.
He's setting a very bad example for the young kids that are coming up. And although we all know, as I said before, that physical nature, that that we have that tab, push, everything, this and that, but still, there should be a sort of limit, and there should be like where you should know your boundary, and you are there like ambassador of AFL as well when you are playing. So it really needs to think about that. I would say AFL on the whole, they should be thinking about those things. Yeah,
well, Toby Green, he's got a track record of doing these sorts of things, like eye gouging, and recently we were talking about this last year in depth about how whenever he goes up in the air, he kicks, the player that's coming. He hit Dollhouse in the face.
Yep.
Yeah.
So these sorts of things that he's been doing. I mean, look, I don't care what he's like off the field. He might be a very nice guy, might be very shy or whatever. But on the field, he's just a thug.
Yeah.
It just is what he is. It's almost like he gets this white line fever and just does these extremely stupid, violent acts. I don't know if he doesn't think about it. It just happens or whatever. But I actually think Toby Green is a very, very good player. I think he's an excellent player. I would love it if he played for St Kilda, but some of the stuff he does, you just shake your head and say, you're an idiot.
Yeah. And that notion of like if he's playing for you, you like him, and if he is not playing for you, you hate him. I think that's probably done and dusted. I don't think no team should want him unless like they want to have a thug in their team.
Yeah, and just as a Bulldogs fan, what do you think about the Bulldogs like this season? Not like obviously they had that bad loss against GWS, but just assessing their season, are you at least happy they made it?
Fantastic. Like as far as Bulldog fans are concerned, they should be very happy about it, and they've got a good season ahead. Hopefully they have a good sort of trade period where they can get a couple of good players and they don't lose any. I don't think they will, because I think that's a very close-knit sort of Luke Beveridge and all the players. You can tell the way he was at the press conference and everything, and he sort of felt about it. But I'm pretty sure they will come back with a good response. And the way I think they were expecting that fierce competition, but not that much. But I believe that was a good finals lesson for Bulldogs, and that they need to come out hard again next time.
This brings us to the qualifying final on Saturday evening between the Brisbane Lions and Richmond Tigers from the Gabba in Brisbane. Simply, in the first half, the game, the Brisbane Lions were on top but kicked badly in front of the goals, eventually letting Richmond win devastating results. The final score was Richmond 18-4 to Brisbane 8-17, and despite the fact that the Lions had 4 more scoring shots than the Tigers, they lost by 47 points. Gabriel, where to know the Tigers, and will Brisbane bounce back?
I don't know about that, but I think that Richmond, I always thought that if whoever wins this game, like if Richmond win this game against Brisbane, then they're pretty much assuring for the premiership. That's what I believe. I think that they just were so clinical against the Lions. They were just so, it really was men against boys. It was those that were experienced, calm heads, people who know what they're doing in these sorts of games and these sorts of atmospheres and arenas against a team that were just sort of overawed by the whole experience. It really did seem like the Brisbane Lions, they were just playing the occasion rather than the game. It seemed like, I mean, some of the misses that they had, I mean, you got to give it as maybe just nerves. I mean, they are human beings after all, people get nervous. So I think that maybe they could bounce back. I'm just still a little bit uncertain about that because they're going to be playing against GWS who are fit and firing and ready to go. So we'll see what happens, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, well, I agree with him. I believe that gave them a good finals lesson, and then because they were seniors, they had more experience. That's what got them. And Luke Hodge, we can see on the other hand, he had like probably the most disposals until the like sort of half mark, which sort of proves that you need a cool and calm head when it's come to the finals.
We will be back with more after the break, where we preview this week to knock out semi-finals. So stick around. Welcome back. Guys, first final of the rack. Geelong takes on West Coast from the MCG on Friday night. Geelong has lost 10 out of 14 finals since 2011. Is there any hope for them this week, even with injuries against tough opposition in the West Coast Eagles, which finally found some from last week with a huge win against the Bombers? Gabriel?
I don't know. Don't think so. I really have a lot of doubts about Geelong. The way they performed against Collingwood and those coaching decisions that we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of question marks about them. I think that, we saw a lot of the faults that Geelong had in terms of planning, in terms of preparation, and also in terms of some of their players, the more experienced heads, really being missing in action. I mean, we expect so much from Ablett, from Selwood, from Kelly, and all these great players, but they were just not there. And like we said, it looked like Collingwood wanted it more than Geelong. And also the decision-making from the coach, more so from the players themselves, leaves a lot to be desired. So whether they've learnt from that remains to be seen. But West Coast, they're just one of these teams that they're not afraid to play away. They're quite comfortable playing at the MCG. I mean, you have to be, in order to win the premiership, you have to be comfortable playing at the MCG. West Coast are totally fine. They've got Nick Naitanui back, McGovern, he's doing well, Shuey, Gaff, he's in fine form as well. West Coast Eagles, they're rolling along really, really well. And West Coast Eagles, I think they're at that position that they like the most, where a lot of people are looking more so towards Richmond and Brisbane, and the less attention on them, the better they feel, like they're just sort of sliding under the radar a little bit. I really do believe that West Coast, they're going to beat Geelong. I don't think that Geelong...
Really?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be one of those rare occasions where whoever finishes first goes out in straight sets. I think that West Coast are not afraid. They're in very good form, and they're going to really give it to Geelong, and I think they're going to win by around maybe 30 points.
Oh, wow.
Well, I agree with him. There are only two factors for me if Geelong is going to win this one. One is their loss-win combination that's going on at the moment. And the second one is if they could come up with a game plan and a game which they haven't played this season. That would be the only reason if they want to get on top of that West Coast at the moment. So they're flying high with every part, as you mentioned. Their midfield is set, their backline is set, and last couple of games which they lost West Coast, their backline wasn't performing that well. They had a couple of mistakes, so that sort of let the other team go over. But I think they've corrected that. And with Nick Nat, that big force in the middle, I believe that sort of, it's like when he taps, everyone knows where it's going to be the ball. Shui, everyone knew that everyone wants the ball. Like he knows that he's going to get a tap and we're going to get the ball. Yeah. So it's as simple as that for them. He gives them the ball, midfield gets it up, they're forward. Josh Kennedy coming back to the form, as I mentioned last game, that Josh Kennedy needs to have a good game, and he did. So Jack Starling, he's already in good form. So there's no stopping West Coast Eagle. And as you mentioned, they are not feared of playing in MCG. So I agree, probably around 20 points margin for me, but I believe it's going to be West Coast.
Wow, okay. The next and last game we look at tonight is the Brisbane Lions and GWS Giants elimination semi-final, played at the Gabba on Saturday evening. Brisbane coming off a big loss and the Giants from a big win. I don't believe that the Lions will put in another indifferent performance and will be playing to hold on to their final hopes. The Lions are quite capable of beating GWS, but will they? A home ground advantage is great, but they must convert with a straight kicking of goal or they may suffer the same fate as last week, Javier.
Yeah, well, they really need to settle their nerves. I believe they're all settled now because Cam Renner, when he was on the field, he was playing superbly, but in front of goals, he just miscued. For Cameron, he needs to step up a bit as well against the good backline as well, because Grimes, he was on top of him against Richmond. So they really need to come up with some plan where these young kids who are in this grand final sort of dream at the moment. So they need to settle their nerves. They're a very good team. They've proved that over the year. Yes, I believe they can beat any team on any day, especially at their home ground. So GWS Giants, I think that hopefully they haven't had just that passion against the Bulldogs, the way they played, the physical force and everything. It wasn't that just an incident before with Bontempelli that sort of led into them that, okay, we don't care about other games, it's just this game. So hopefully they can put up that same sort of show, same physicality in the game, and same sort of things around the clearances and stoppages. Otherwise, I think Brisbane would become up with a good plan or so. And I've just got this feeling that it's going to be a very close match and Brisbane might come on top for me.
Well, look, I have to say I would like Brisbane to win this game. No offence to GWS and all that, but because they've been so good this whole season. They've just been this breath of fresh air, this Cinderella story, and Chris Fagan, he's just worked wonders with this team. But I've got my doubts. I don't know. After their performance against Richmond, I mean, yes, it's against Richmond, who are fantastic and amazing, and it was their first final in such a long time. But I've got my doubts on this one. I think that GWS, like Richmond, the experience is there. The experience is key, and it helps separate one side to the other. Knowledge is power. They definitely have a lot of knowledge in that team. So I think that GWS, as you said, fit and firing, and with that sort of momentum of really demolishing the Western Bulldogs, they've got a very good chance of winning this game. And just like West Coast, just like all those other teams, they're not afraid to go and win games outside of their home. So this is a really good opportunity for them. And if they don't win this game, if they don't win this final, I don't see them winning a premiership anytime soon because they've had so many opportunities. So subconsciously, this could be that sort of like, okay, we have to win this. This is probably our best chance of actually getting it. This is probably our final chance of getting close to winning it. So that sort of motivation could also put them over the line. I would like it if Brisbane won, but I don't know. I've got my doubts. So I think GWS will probably win by about 15, maybe 20 points.
Okay, well, I believe they really need to stop Mumford in a way because he's going to be very physical. And to me, I believe it's going to be about 10 points difference, but towards Brisbane.
Well, I hope our panel's tips put you in the picture. That's all we have for you this week, but we will be back next week with more finals reviews and previews and take a hard look at who the likely grand finalist contenders will be. You've been watching and listening to the Multicultural AFL Footy Show all around Australia on the Community Radio Network, Community TV, and on Aurora TV Foxtel. We are also online through the NEMBC's AFL Footy website. See you next week. I am Vanessa Gatica.
I'm Harbeer Singh.
I'm Gabriel D'Angelo.
And thank you for watching.
Let me hear you.